you just have to watch again. Okay, you have to watch the recording for part A. Okay, so basically, right. Okay, so part B of chapter 5, which is on hormonal and nervous communication. So basically, for this part, we are going to look at part B, which is on structured question. Sekejap ya. Okay, it's basically for question one. For question one, it gives you figure 2, which shows a diagram of human endocrine glands, organs, and the structure of hormone cortisol. And the structure of hormone cortisol. Okay, so as you know, cortisol is a hormone that is made up of. The composition is made up of steroids. Okay, so the precursor molecule of this hormone is basically cholesterol. Okay, so cholesterol, as you can see, it consists of 4-fuse ring that, like you have learned during semester 1. Okay, so 4-fuse ring for cholesterol, which is the precursor molecule to synthesize steroid hormones. Okay, so steroid hormones, you have many different types. For example, for this one is cortisol. And then the most common one is your sex hormones, the testosterone, the estrogen, the progesterone are also steroid hormones, which is the precursor molecule that is used to synthesize those hormones are cholesterol. So the difference between this hormone are these side chains. Okay, so the side chains here will determine the different types of steroid hormones. Okay, it determines the different types of steroid hormones to be synthesized from the cholesterol. So so cortisol is the hormone which is synthesized by adrenal gland. So if you look at this diagram, you have to label all the glands. Okay, all the glands in figure 2. So which one is the adrenal gland? Which one? It is the K. K is adrenal gland. So adrenal gland is located just above your kidney. So for adrenal gland, it is divided into two regions. Okay, two regions, which is adrenal cortex and adrenal medulla. So adrenal cortex is the outer part. Adrenal medulla is the inner part. Okay, so the inner part of the adrenal medulla, okay, it is used to secrete hormones such as epinephrine, okay, which is the secretion is prompt, okay, which is when your body requires that hormone, your body or the adrenal medulla will secrete the epinephrine, for example, during fight or flight situation. Okay, for adrenal cortex, it is used to synthesize the hormone cortisol. Okay, so if you look at your notes, can if you look at your notes, just okay, slide 38, if you refer to your notes. Okay, so okay, so adrenal medulla, it secretes two different types of hormone, which is epinephrine and also norepinephrine, okay, which is to increase the amount of glucose in your blood at that moment. Okay, and as for the adrenal cortex, it is to secrete corticoids hormone, which is there are two types, which is mineralocorticoids and also glucocorticoids. Okay, kalau tengok dekat punya gambar dalam slide 38 ni, as you can see, the function of the adrenal medulla is to secrete. It does not produce the hormone. It is just to secrete those two, epinephrine and norepinephrine, from the instruction of your brain. Okay, so it is like your posterior pituitary. Okay, posterior pituitary, it secretes the hormone which is produced by the hypothalamus. Okay, kalau cortex dia macam adrenal uh, sorry, dia macam anterior pituitary, which is it produces and secrete its own hormones. Okay, so you have to know the difference between those two region of adrenal medulla. Okay, so basically both of these hormones, which is epinephrine and also glucocorticoids, it is used to increase blood glucose level when your body requires energy. Okay, when you are lacking um, the glucose from the food that you eat, okay, your blood glucose level is low, so your body will convert, okay, glycogen into glucose, okay, the stored glycogen into glucose, for example, or amino acid, for example, it is turned to protein and also fats. Protein and also fats will also be converted into glucose to increase blood glucose level. This is when your body is under stress, okay, under stress. Tapi cortex dia akan secret glucocorticoids tu masa body awak ada stress yang berpanjangan lah. Kan berpanjangan, you are stressed sebab tak makan ke, kecewa, putus cinta ke, whatever kan, so tak selera makan, so your body will turn on this mode of response, okay, which is to secrete glucocorticoids by the cortex. Tapi kalau medulla, it is you are under stress, your body requires energy at that time in the fight or flight situation. Yeah, so those are the two differences. So that is adrenal gland. So ada dua region. So for the for the gland J, okay. So gland J is because it is so tiny, so you could either label it as hypothalamus or pituitary gland. Okay, so because it is too tiny, but if the diagram was to be enlarged, okay, and it shows specifically to hypothalamus, then you have to label hypothalamus. Okay, if it shows specifically to anterior pituitary, for example, you have to label it as anterior pituitary. So ingat dia anterior bahagian depan lah, posterior belakang. Okay. So anterior is the gland that is made up of epithelial cells, and as for the posterior, it is made up of neurosecretory cells. Okay, so you have to know the differences between anterior and posterior pituitary. Posterior pituitary is to secretes the hormone produced by the hypothalamus. For the anterior pituitary, it is to secrete. It produces its own hormone, secrete its own hormone. So for the anterior pituitary, it produces much more hormone compared to the posterior. Posterior ada dua je, ingat Posterior, it secretes the hormone oxytocin and also ADH, okay, antidiuretic hormone. And as for the anterior pituitary, it produces the hormone, for example, FSH, okay, follicle stimulating hormone, LH, okay, luteinizing hormones, and then you have the thyroid stimulating hormones. Okay, so you have the growth hormones. So those are the hormones produced and secreted by the anterior pituitary. Okay, so and then L is obviously testis lah. So the function of testis is to produce the hormone testosterone. Okay, N is the ovaries, which is to produce two hormones for the female, which is estrogen and progesterone. So the target organ for estrogen and progesterone, as you know, it is the uterus, okay, which is to stimulate the thickening and maintain the thickening of the endometrium lining, okay, to prepare for pregnancy. So for each, nampak tak, soalan A pun dah banyak dah saya elaborate. So supposedly when you look at the diagram, you should know and you should be able to highlight all the important points, okay, when you are looking at certain diagrams. So that's why I said before, when you are learning biology, so apart from reading the text, you have to refer to your diagram, and it is better when you have the diagram, you jot down all the important points, okay, on that diagram. Okay, so that you don't have to return back to the to your text. Okay, so bila dah nampak diagram awak tu, awak boleh, okay, ini fungsi hypothalamus, ini fungsi adrenal gland. Tak payah nak tengok balik, oh mana slide yang cerita pasal organ-organ ni. So just you print out the diagram large enough, for example, in A4 paper, and then you just jot down all the function or all the mechanism that involved for that diagram. Okay, tu tip je lah. Alright. So B, state two function of organ N. So N is the ovary. Okay, so the ovary is the gonad for female. So the function of gonad is to produce the gametes. Okay, so the formation of gametes, which is secondary oocyte, and the process is oogenesis. So you could write point one. Okay, site for female gamete formation, or you could say secondary oocyte. Okay, or it is where oogenesis occurs, okay, to produce the ovum or the secondary oocyte. The term ovum and secondary oocyte, you have to know, you have to differentiate. Ovum is when secondary oocyte is fertilized by sperm. Okay, so then the secondary oocyte completes meiosis 2. Okay, so that one at that stage you can call it as the ovum. Okay. And then second point, it is worth to mark, right? Okay, dua markah. So produce hormone, estrogen and progesterone. So the target organ for estrogen and progesterone is the uterus. Okay, so identify structure secretes the hormone cortisol. So it is adrenal cortex. Okay, or adrenal. So kalau jawab K betul, jawab adrenal gland betul. Cakap adrenal cortex betul, tapi kalau jawab adrenal medulla salah. So it automatically makes your answer incorrect. Okay. So kalau awak tengok apa keyword dekat sini, identify structure that secrete cortisol. So kenapa jawapan K ni betul? Sebab dia suruh identify je. So identify by you writing K, dah boleh dapat jawapan. Dah boleh dapat markah. Tapi kalau soalan tu dia cakap name the gland that secretes the hormone cortisol, then you have to write adrenal. Okay, adrenal gland or adrenal cortex. So awak kena tahu perbezaan soalan tu. Soalan kalau dia suruh identify, you just can write the letters. Tapi if the question ask you to name, okay, the specific name of that organ, you have to give the name. Okay, so D, what is the class of hormone cortisol? So as you can see, so it is steroid. Okay, so you have to know the difference. So kalau macam protein, it is consists of amino acid lah. So this one is consists of 4' string, which is the precursor is cholesterol. Okay, so E, give two differences between steroid hormone action and peptide hormone action. Okay, so based on the composition of the hormone, you have to know how the hormone works. Okay, the mechanism of action for the hormone. So if the hormone is made up of steroid, it is lipid soluble hormone. If the hormone is made up of amino acids or peptide, polypeptide chain, so it is peptide hormone action. Or this one you can call it as water soluble hormone. Okay, water soluble hormone. This one is the first one is lipid soluble hormone. Okay, so they are the same. Okay. So why is it called water soluble hormone? Because it can be carried in your blood plasma. Your blood plasma consists of 90% of water. Okay, your blood plasma alone. Your blood composition is consists of what? Plasma and also cellular elements. Okay, so your blood plasma, 90% of it is water. Okay. Kalau jaya, if you have question, you can ask. Okay. So your blood plasma is 55%. Okay, so 55% your blood composition, 55% is your plasma, 45% is cellular elements, your red blood cells, your white blood cells, your platelets. Okay, so 45% is cellular elements. So 55% of plasma, 90% of it is water. Okay, 90% of plasma is water. Okay, so the question asks for two differences. So in this, as you can see, it gives you so many differences between the two mechanisms. Okay, lipid soluble hormone and water soluble hormone. Okay, so you can you have only you have to only write down. Okay, write down the two answers. Okay, so for the first answer, um as for the lipid soluble hormone or steroid hormone action, so it can easily pass through the plasma membrane and enter the target cells. So lipid soluble hormone, it can because the receptor is located within the cell, either in the cytoplasm or in the nucleus. So they have to cross the plasma membrane. So they can easily pass the plasma membrane because it is also made up of lipid. Your plasma membrane is composed of phospholipid bilayer. So because steroid is also lipid, so it can easily um, pass through the plasma membrane and enter the target cell. As for the protein hormones, okay, peptide hormones, so they cannot pass through the plasma membrane and cannot enter the cell. Okay, so how does the hormone works? It binds to the receptor which is located at the plasma membrane. So that leads to the second point. Okay, second point. So hormone binds to the receptor in the cytoplasm or in the nucleus. So for steroid hormone, the location of the receptor is either in the cytoplasm or in the nucleus. So to form hormone receptor complex. Okay. So next, for the peptide hormone or water soluble hormone, so the receptor is located at the surface of the plasma membrane, or you could say the receptor is embedded in the plasma membrane, okay, to form as the hormone binds to the receptor, it forms the hormone receptor complex. Okay, so for peptide hormone, okay, so as the hormone binds to the hormone receptor complex, it activates a series of reactions to occur inside cell. It activates protein, okay, within the cell, such as, for example, it activates enzyme. Okay, so that those are, we call it as a signal transduction. So in the process of it, it produces CAMP. Okay, CAMP from ATP. So CAMP is secondary messenger. Okay, secondary messenger. For the hormone itself, it is the first messenger. Okay, hormone is first messenger. The production of CAMP, cyclic adenosine monophosphate. Okay, it is secondary messenger. So for the steroid hormone, there's no involvement in the production of CAMP. Okay, so for the next point, okay, so once the CMP is activated, so it activates protein kinase. Obviously, for steroid hormone, there's no activation of protein kinase. Okay, the next one you could write the protein kinase activate other enzymes. So this one we call it as signal transduction. Okay, which is point number 7. Okay, so signal transduction mechanism occurs to affect the target cell, which is to activate enzyme, activate chemical substances which is attached to protein channel and causes the protein channel to open and causes ion to enter into the cell, for example, or other molecules to enter into the cell. Okay, so the protein could also affect the transcription that occurs within the nucleus. Okay, so that is the effects of the signal transduction. So back to point 5. Okay, so because for lipid soluble hormone there's activation of protein kinase, but for steroid hormone there's no activation of protein kinase. Okay, and the main function of the steroid hormone is number 6 here. Okay, which is the hormone receptor complex will either activate or suppress gene expression. Okay, so awak boleh tambah lagi sini, suppress or activate gene expression. So either a certain gene will be activated to produce certain protein, or the gene will be suppressed. It cannot lead to the formation or production of certain protein. Okay, so that is the function of the hormone receptor complex. Kalau macam itulah. Okay. So for the yang ini, for number 6 ni, for water soluble hormone, hormone receptor complex trigger cascade effects, okay, to occur to amplify the effects of hormone. So cascade effects, which involve a series of chemical reaction to occur inside cell. One enzyme is activated, it activates another enzyme, until a certain reaction occurs within the cell. For example, kalau untuk water soluble hormone ni, we have the epinephrine. Okay, so epinephrine, if dia bind kepada receptor, kalau awak tengok kat opinota, so epinephrine binds to the receptor at the plasma membrane, and the effects is that it activates enzyme which is function to convert glycogen to glucose. So epinephrine ni dia bukan bertindak sebagai enzim untuk breakdown glycogen kepada glucose ya. Dia mengarahkan liver cell tu, for example, liver cell to activate enzyme within the cell to convert glycogen into glucose. So that is the effects of the hormone epinephrine, for example. Okay. Kalau for lipid soluble hormone transcription, because point number 60 is it either activate or suppress gene. So if activation occurs, so transcription and translation occurs. Okay, to produce certain protein requires to alter activity of the cell. Okay, so itu fungsi dia lah macam okay, tu fungsi perbezaan antara steroid hormone and also peptide hormone. So you could list any two of these point and make sure your point they are of the same comparison. You compare apple to apple lah. Tak boleh nak compare apple to banana kan, tak boleh. So dia tak sama walaupun point awak tu betul, tapi bila awak compare tu salah, so dia jadi salah. Contohnya kalau point number one, steroid, awak tulis steroid hormone can easily pass through the plasma membrane and enter target cell. Untuk steroid protein hormone, tiba-tiba awak tulis the receptor is located at the plasma membrane. Walaupun point tu betul, tapi comparison awak tu salah, so jawapan awak salah. Faham? Okay, so comparison tu mesti betul. Okay, mesti apple to apple. Okay, question number 2. Okay, so figure 3 shows a cross section of an ovary. Okay, okay, so structure Z, as you can see, the diagram is not so clear, but you could see it. Okay, so structure Z is developed after ovulation and maintained during early stage of pregnancy. So name and give one function of structure Z. So structure Z, as you can see, from the statement, kalau tak nampak kan gambar dia, so tengok dia punya statement, develop after ovulation. Okay, so it means that matured follicles will be ruptured and release secondary oocyte. So what happened to that follicle? It becomes corpus luteum. Okay, so corpus luteum. So this corpus luteum will be maintained from the hormone secreted by the anterior pituitary, which is LH. Okay, LH hormone will maintain the structure of corpus luteum during the early pregnancy. Okay. So basically, the function of corpus luteum is to produce and secrete the hormone estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen function to stimulate the thickening of the endometrium lining. The function of progesterone is to maintain the thickening of the endometrium lining. So mula dia stimulate, mula endometrium lining tu akan start to thicken, and then to maintain the thickening of the endometrium lining is done by the progesterone. Okay, so but if there is no pregnancy, no implementation of the the fertilized eggs, okay, the zygote into the endometrium lining. So the corpus luteum it will be disintegrate. Okay, it will be disintegrate. So corpus luteum dia tak boleh nak last long. Okay. So kalau dalam pregnancy, macam mana nak maintainkan the secretion of estrogen and progesterone? Walaupun dah berlaku implementation of the zygote kan, embryo tu dah start membesar, corpus luteum tu akan musnah juga. Okay, so what is the structure that maintains the secretion of estrogen and progesterone for the rest of the pregnancy? It is done by the placenta. Okay, so placenta will take over the secretion of estrogen and progesterone after corpus luteum is destroyed. Okay, so awak kena tahulah tu. Okay, so corpus luteum. So identify one hormone that develops structure Y. So structure Y is growing follicle. Okay, structure Y is the growing follicle. So as you can see here, you have the secondary oocytes. Okay. So the hormone that involved in the development of follicle is the follicle stimulating hormone. Okay, FSH. Nama hormone pun follicle stimulating hormone. It causes the follicle to grow and matures, and inside you have the secondary oocyte. Okay, so the FSH is aided by the luteinizing hormone LH. Okay. So these two hormones you have to remember, it is produced and secreted by the anterior pituitary. Okay. Okay, so next, what is the class of the hormone? So it is protein. Okay, so the anterior pituitary secretes so many hormones. Okay, FSH, LH, growth hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone. So those hormones are made up of protein. Okay. So B. So describe the mechanism of action for hormones secreted by structure Y. So structure Y is the growing follicle. So structure Y secretes the hormone estrogen. Okay, so estrogen, as you know, it is steroid hormone. It is sex hormone. So obviously it is steroid hormones. So for this one, so you have to give the mechanism of action for lipid soluble hormone. Okay. Lipid soluble hormone. So yang tadilah, okay, so the hormone which is estrogen is produced and secreted by the ovary, but the target organ is the uterus. So the hormone has to travel in your blood to get to the target organ, which is the uterus. So in order for the estrogen, okay, to travel in your blood, because it is lipid, so it cannot dissolve in the water in the plasma. Okay, it cannot dissolve or easily transported in the plasma. So it has to bind to transport protein. Okay, so lipid soluble or hormone are carried in the blood attached to carrier protein or transport protein. You can use either of the term, carrier protein or transport protein. Saya check kat nota jap, dia guna istilah apa. Dalam nota awak ditulis, dia guna istilah transport protein. So you could write either one. Okay, transport protein or carrier protein. Okay. So when the hormone arrives at the target cell, okay, so in this case, if the hormone is estrogen, so the target cell is the cell of the uterus. Okay, so then they dissociate from their carrier, okay, or the transport protein. So pass through the plasma membrane of the cell. Okay, so this one is considered as the same point. Okay, so when the target hormone reaches the target cell, it passes through the plasma membrane of the target cell. So next, okay, tadi macam soalan tadi lah kan. So hormone binds to receptor either located in the nucleus or in the cytoplasm. Okay, so nucleus or in the cytoplasm to form the hormone receptor complex. So ini awak kena tulis lah. So hormone binds to receptor in the nucleus to form hormone receptor complex, ataupun hormone binds to receptor in the cytoplasm to form hormone receptor complex. Okay, so next, okay, so lipid soluble hormones or the hormone receptor complex now can activate or suppress, okay, repress, suppress sama je, specific gene in the nucleus. Okay, it activate gene expression, or it suppresses gene expression, okay, within the cell. So those are the 4 points that you could write. So kalau dalam exam, kalau disuruh tulis mechanism of action for water soluble hormone or lipid soluble hormones, the range of mark is either 3 or 4. Okay, either 3 or 4 marks. Okay, so you have to know the how the two mechanism works, water soluble hormone and lipid soluble hormone. So kalau awak ada note apa point-point ni kan, so especially for this one kan, so this one, so point yang pertama, point yang kedua, point yang ketiga, point yang keempat, so boleh lah kan. So in transduction ni pun penting untuk awak mention. Okay. Okay, so next question E. So why structure Z degenerate if no fertilization occurs? So Z is corpus luteum tadi kan? Okay, so corpus luteum. So if there's no fertilization, there's no implantation of the zygote, and there's no pregnancy. Okay, so corpus luteum ni kalau ada ke tak ada pregnancy pun dia akan degenerate juga. Tapi kalau obviously kalau tak ada pregnancy pun dia akan degenerate. Okay. So as you know, the function of corpus luteum, which is structure Z, is to produce estrogen and progesterone. Okay. So the high amount of estrogen and progesterone secreted by corpus luteum will cause or will affects the hypothalamus. It gives a negative feedback. Okay, negative feedback to the hypothalamus and also to the anterior pituitary. So it inhibits hypothalamus from producing and secreting GnRH. Okay, gonadotropin releasing hormone. So when there's low production or secretion of GnRH, or there's no production of GnRH, so it cannot cause the anterior pituitary to secrete and produce and secrete follicle stimulating hormone and also LH. Kan nampak? So kat sini apa effect dia? No GnRH. Okay, GnRH. And kalau anterior pituitary, no FSH and LH. Okay, so FSH and LH ni saya mention tadi, dia LH especially is the hormone is to maintain corpus luteum. So when there's no LH or when there's low secretion of LH, so LH cannot maintain the corpus luteum. So therefore, corpus luteum will degenerate. Okay. So so it leads to point number 2. GnRH, FSH, and LH will be reduced. Okay, the secretion of GnRH, FSH, and LH will be reduced due to the negative feedback. Okay, the inhibition caused by the high production of production of progesterone and also estrogen. So when there's low amount of LH, obviously it causes the corpus luteum to be disintegrate or degenerate. Okay, so sebab apa LH is used to maintain corpus luteum. Okay. So kalau untuk part ni kan, awak kena tengok balik awak punya nota yang slide yang ada banyak graph tu. Kan, so graph from the hypothalamus kan to the anterior pituitary, hypothalamus secrete GnRH, causes the anterior pituitary to secrete FSH and LH. Dia punya effect kepada ovary kan. So ovary causes the ovary to secrete estrogen. FSH causes the ovary to cause the follicle to grow. Okay, so as the follicle grows, it secretes estrogen. Okay, so estrogen causes the endometrium lining start to thicken. Dia prepare untuk apa if there's possible pregnancy to occur nanti. Okay. So kalau as FSH secretes kan, kalau tengok kat graph tu, tolong refer pada awak punya graph, akan ada berlaku peak of secretion of LH. Awak tengok awak tengok kat awak punya nota. Peak of secretion of LH occurs just before ovulation. Just before ovulation. Pernah keluar dalam exam disuruh awak lukis graph untuk awak draw peak of LH. So salah kalau awak lukis peak of LH masa ovulation tu. LH peak sebelum ovulation sebab LH is a hormone that causes the follicle to rupture and releases secondary oocyte. Faham Okay, LH will peak before ovulation. Okay, just before ovulation. That causes the follicle to rupture and releases secondary oocyte. So as a secondary oocyte is released and enters into the fallopian tube to be fertilized by sperm, if there's sperm, so the corpus luteum will develop, so the rupture follicle will develop into corpus luteum. Okay, so corpus luteum is the gland that secrete estrogen and progesterone. So tengok kat graph tu, bila corpus luteum secrete estrogen and progesterone in high amount, effect dia adalah kepada hypothalamus and also anterior pituitary. Okay, dia bagi negative feedback yang macam soalan ni, negative feedback. So negative feedback, low GnRH, low FSH and low LH. Okay, so bila kedua-dua hormon ni low, so dia akan menyebabkan corpus luteum tu disintegrate. So corpus luteum perlukan LH. So bila dah rendah, corpus luteum akan disintegrate. Tu je. So make sure you go back, you study back slide yang ada all the graphs, okay, the graphs and also what happened to the follicle and also to the endometrium lining. Okay, so you should be able to look at the diagram and you should be able to explain what happened in that diagram. Okay, so next question 3. Figure 4 shows structure of neuron. Okay, so name structure G and I. So as you can see, G, it is, as you can see inside here you have the nucleus. Okay, so here you have the cytoplasm. Okay, so obviously G is cell body. Okay, I is the nodes of Ranvier. Okay, H is the Schwann cell, or kalau dia were to highlight all this, it is the myelin sheath. Okay. Okay, so state one function of H. H is the myelin sheath lah kan. So myelin sheath. Kalau jawab, kalau dia tunjuk spesifik kat sini, kalau jawab Schwann cell pun betul, kalau jawab myelin sheath pun betul. Okay, so boleh. So the function of the myelin sheath is to act as electrical insulator or prevent ion movement through it. Kalau, okay, you know that the function of the neuron, especially at the axon here, at the axon region, it is to generate action potential. Okay, action potential is generated at the nodes of Ranvier. Kenapa boleh berlakunya action potential tu? Sekejap ya. Okay, action potential occurs at the nodes of Ranvier. Why? Because the voltage gated channel, okay, for sodium and also potassium only located at the nodes of Ranvier. So that region is where the movement of sodium enters into the axon and causes the axon to turn from negative to become positive. Okay, due to the movement of sodium ion into the axon, due to the opening of voltage gated channel for sodium. That is during depolarization. Kan, depolarization daripada resting apa, negative 70 millivolt to threshold is negative 55 to the peak of action potential, which is positive 30 millivolt. Okay, so this is, we call it as depolarization, from negative to less negative to positive. Okay, so the movement of ion is only occurs at the nodes of Ranvier. The area that is covered by the myelin sheath or the Schwann cell. Okay, there is no movement of ions, so that's why we call it as electrical insulator. Dekat kawasan yang covered by myelin sheath, there will be no movement of ions because there is no voltage gated channel for both of the ions, sodium and also potassium. As for potassium, when the peak of action potential reaches, it causes the voltage gated channel for potassium to close. Voltage gated channel for sodium to close, and voltage gated channel for potassium open. Bila terbuka, sifat potassium ni dia nak keluar daripada sel. Okay, so bila dia keluar, maksudnya akan berlaku repolarization. Okay, so from positive it becomes negative. So this is repolarization due to the movement of potassium out of the cell. Okay, through the voltage gated channel for potassium. So dia akan reach negative 70. So bila reach negative 70, dia akan keep on falling negative. Okay, sebab apa? Feature voltage gated channel for potassium is that it close slowly. Okay, close slowly until it reaches the value of negative 90. So this region we call it as hyperpolarization, kan? Okay. So when it reaches the value of negative 70 millivolts, at this point, all the voltage gated channel for potassium will close. Okay, bila close, there is no potassium moving out anymore. So dia akan reach balik value resting state tu. Okay, resting potential. So kenapa dia boleh naik balik kepada resting potential? Due to the three factors, which is the sodium potassium pump. Okay, sodium potassium pump, the ionic concentration, which is the presence of fixed anion, and also the presence of leak ion channel. Okay, the presence of leak ion channel for sodium and also for potassium. Okay, so those are the three factors that maintain the resting potential. Okay, so another function of the myelin sheath is to act as is to speed, okay, the transmission of impulse. Okay, this to speed up the transmission of impulse through a process we call it as saltatory conduction. Okay, so saltatory conduction is when the impulse, okay, jump from nodes to nodes, okay, from one node to another node. Okay, so that is how the myelin sheath help or function. Okay, one, it function as the electrical insulator. Second, it speed up the transmission of impulse through saltatory conduction, the leaping of action potential from one nodes to another nodes of Ranvier. Okay, so next, okay, see, complete the table below that describe the neuron in figure 4. So if you refer back to your notes, it classifies the neuron, okay, based on the location and the function of the neuron. So you have the motor neuron, you have the interneuron, and you have the sensory neuron. For the neuron that looks like this, where you have the cell body in between the axon here, okay, so it is the sensory neuron. Kalau motor neuron, dia macam biasalah, kan? So you have the cell body, you have the dendrite, kan, and then you have the axon, and then you have the axon terminal. That is the motor neuron. Kalau interneuron, if you look at your diagram, you have the dendrites, okay, and in the short distance you have the synaptic terminal lah. Macam itulah. You please refer back to your notes to look at the difference in the structure of the three neurons. Okay, so this one is the sensory neuron. So the function of the sensory neuron is to carry message from sensory receptor, okay, to the central nervous system, to your brain lah. Okay, so location, for example, the epidermis of the skin. Okay. Okay, next, the last question. Describe the transmission of impulse along an axon. Ini saya dah terangkan. So yang ini kalau awak terangkan how action potential is produced, salah. Kan, or if you terangkan, okay, voltage gated channel for potassium opens, potassium enters into the axon, causes the depolarization to occurs, changes the charge within the plasma membrane from negative to positive. Itu salah ya. Sebab apa itu you terangkan macam mana action potential tu terhasil. Yang ini macam mana action potential tu berjalan, okay, or transmitted along the axon. Okay, so you have a long axon, kan, long axon, so it is covered by the myelin sheath, okay, and then this is where the action potential will occur. Okay, so macam mana impulse tu boleh transmit, okay, transmit along the axon. So you have to explain, okay, along the region. Okay, so this is for example the first region. Kita ignorekan myelin sheath tu sekarang ni untuk mudah faham. Okay, so this is the first region. Okay, first region. So the first region is where apa asalnya dalam sel ni kan, region yang sebelum ni dia negatif. Sel ni asalnya dalam keadaan negatif. Okay, axon ni dalam keadaan negatif. So the region where an action potential is generated, which is depolarization occurs, okay, sodium enters into the axon through the opening of voltage gated channel for sodium. Okay, so voltage gated channel for sodium opens, sodium enters into the cell and causes the membrane to be depolarized. Okay, depolarized. Okay, depolarized. So sodium enters into the neuron membrane, creating the action potential. So daripada apa yang resting kat sini kan, kat sini negative, right? Okay, so sampai dia reach positive 30. So this is the region where the peak of an action potential occurs. Okay, so action potential moves to the next region and potassium gated channel will open and potassium move out of the axon. Yang ini keadaan ni, okay, keadaan bila first region ni is depolarized, dia akan induce region ahead of it to be depolarized. Okay, region ahead of it to be depolarized. So maksudnya baru sikit sodium akan masuk. Tapi bila kawasan ni dia dah reach peak of an action potential, what happen is that it causes, okay, this region to undergo repolarization. Okay, repolarization. So potassium move out of the axon. Okay, move out of the axon. Yang ni dia akan berlakunya repolarization. Okay, so repolarization at the first region here causes the second region to be depolarized. Okay, depolarized until depolarization causes the peak of an action potential. Macam tu je lah kan. So yang ni akan jadi daripada sikit masuk, banyak sodium akan masuk. So it causes more sodium to enter and the peak of an action potential occurs at the second region. So second region bila dah reach peak, so dia akan induce depolarization to occur. Okay, a small amount of sodium enters. Okay, tapi bila dah reach kat positive 30 at second region, akan berlaku depolarization again. Okay, depolarization again. So yang ini daripada positif dia jadi negatif. Sebab apa? Sebab potassium move out. Potassium move out. So dia akan berlaku depolarization. Okay, peak and then depolarize. Peak and then depolarize. Okay, so sama juga. So that is how transmission of impulse occurs. First region, depolarization occurs until peak of an action potential. So first region tu akan undergo repolarization and causes the second region to undergo depolarization. Macam itulah sampai at reach peak. Bila dah peak, dia akan undergo repolarization, induce the next region to be depolarized. Okay. So ingat dia istilah depolarize, from negative jadi positif. Repolarization from positif jadi negatif. So negatif sebab apa? Potassium keluar. Positif sebab apa? Sodium masuk. Okay, so that is how an impulse is transmitted along the axon. Okay, so kalau kita tengok balik semula kat jawapan ni kan, so as an impulse arrive at axon, sodium voltage gated channel open. Okay, sodium enters into the neuron membrane creating action potential. Yang ni depolarization lah kan, depolarization. So action potential move to the next region, causes potassium voltage gated channel to open. Yang ini adalah pada kawasan yang first region tu tadi, yang hasilkan action potential yang sebelumnya tu tadi. Okay, so potassium move out, causes repolarization. So at this time, sodium voltage gated channel are closed at the first region and open the next region. So macam itulah. Okay, so kalau faham ke? Ada yang tak faham Boleh tak? Kalau kita tengok dekat awak punya notes, kita tengok dekat notes. Make sure bila awak jawab soalan yang disuruh, make sure you know how to differentiate, how to answer question. If the question asks for how action potential is generated dengan how action potential is transmitted, those are two different cara untuk awak jawab. Kalau how action potential is generated, awak explainkan yang ini. Ni. This is how action potential is generated. Okay. Resting potential and causes and causes depolarization to occur kan, depolarization, opening of sodium voltage gated channel. So ini adalah positive feedback. Okay, positive feedback. Sekejap. Nampak ke yang saya tunjuk ni? Okay, so positive feedback. So maksudnya mula sikit voltage gated channel open. Okay, sikit. Lepas tu bila the threshold, dia akan terus menyebabkan positive feedback, which is more opening of voltage gated sodium channel. So more sodium enters and causes depolarization until it reach at the peak of action potential. Ya.
Yeah. Madam tengah present ya? Tak nampak?
Tak nampak ya? Sekejap. Oh, saya tak select. Okay. Okay, so if you look at this kan, diagram kan, so awak kena tahu macam mana nak differentiatekan soalan, macam mana nak jawab soalan. Bila soalan tu tanya, okay, explain how action potential is generated. Yang ini awak kena jawab macam ni kan, how action potential is generated by you referring to this diagram. Masa exam jangan refer pada diagram ni, awak kena explain sendirilah kan. So okay, so action potential, kalau generator yang ni, terangkan. Okay, so resting potential bila impulse reach the axon, so dia akan menyebabkan depolarization, opening of some sodium voltage gated channel until sodium enters into the axon until threshold is reached kan. daripada negative to less negative. So bila dia reach value negative 55, dia akan trigger opening of more voltage gated sodium channel and causes more sodium to enters into the cell and causes depolarization to occurs until the peak of an action potential which is positive 30. Positive 30 ni adalah point yang mana voltage gated sodium channel close, voltage gated channel potassium opens. Open, apa akan yang berlaku? Potassium keluar. Keluar sudah akan jadi daripada positif jadi negatif. Sebab positif ion keluar kan, potassium keluar. So dia akan turun. So this phase we call it as repolarization ataupun falling phase of action potential. Ni rising phase. Rising phase of action potential. This one is falling phase of action potential or repolarization. So dia akan keep on keluar sampai dia reach hyperpolarization ni. So hyperpolarization is when potassium still move out. Okay, tapi bila dia reach negative 90, so no more potassium opens, so no more potassium move out, so dia akan reach balik kepada resting potential. Tapi kalau disuruh ceritakan pasal transmission of impulse, okay, yang ini. Yang ini akan diterangkan. This is transmission. So one region is will undergo depolarization. Okay. So it induces the second region to undergo depolarization. So depolarization in the second region causes repolarization in the first region. Ingat ya, repolarization is the falling phase of action potential. Depolarization is the rising phase of an action potential. So that's why that is how impulse is transmitted along the axon. So dia akan sentiasa bergerak ke depan, okay, dan dia tak akan pergi ke belakang sebab belakang akan sentiasa berlaku repolarization. Belakang action potential akan berlaku repolarization. Depan depolarization, belakang repolarization of the previous action potential. Faham ya? Boleh tak? Boleh ke? Ke saya shock sendiri saya explain ni?
Boleh, madam.
Boleh ya? So kalau rasa susah nak fahamkan, please you go back, you read again and please make sure that you understand. Kalau susah nak faham